Hi David, thanks for the footage and thanks for purchasing the online lesson. Don't panic too much about all the lines and the dots, they'll become very clear as we progress through this initial part of the session. What I'm going to do is give you an overview of your action, what the main issues are, what your priorities should be. Then I'm going to get you up against a sort of model swing. The drills that I'm going to give you, more feels really than anything when I look at your swing. What I feel is that it needs a little bit more stability and a little bit better sequencing. So I'm going to go through some key alignments. I'm going to offer you some feels and visuals compared to some model swings a little bit later. And what I'm going to do on this one is slightly different in the sense that you've probably seen this with a couple of my guys online. I'm going to do this one lesson in two parts. Now, what I want to do is go through my main thoughts, my main feelings, where your priorities should be. Then after a week or so of being able to practice this, I want you to send me some footage and I'll just do you a brief comparison, take maybe 5 minutes, just to sort of highlight the changes, allow you to see the benefits and gain a far better understanding of what you're doing and why you're doing it. So that's the format I'd like to run with you based on what I've seen looking at your swing before doing this lesson. So just working you through the system or through the model from P1 to finishing the swing at say P9. What I'd like to do is just highlight some key concerns. So P1, there's a little bit of a press forward from face on with your knee. That's not an issue. That right knee kinks in. It's almost like a little bump start for you. A lot of golfers do that. No real issue, just in case you were sort of concerned about that. It doesn't really affect anything. What I do see is from sort of P1 to P3, the hands get pulled in a little bit too much. Maybe not initially, but that trail leg straightens a little bit too much too soon. And that trail hip gets pulled behind you a little bit too much too soon. So we look at this right leg here, that should be straightening incrementally from P1 to P4. Now in your case, what happens is it extends fully from P1 to P2.8. So it's pretty much all gone. There's nothing left to give then during the rest of the swing, which then leads to a slightly flatter top of the backswing than you would like. What we also see is we see the head drop down in that sort of purple frame from face on and the pelvis move forward. So rather than being stable, it's almost like too much of a good thing. I'm trying to read between the lines here, if you will, and sort of guesstimate as best I can, but it looks like somebody's sort of advised you or you've picked up on this shoulder down aspect. So there's the turn, which is traditionally what people focus on, is very evident. The straightening of the right leg, so these are all key pieces within the pattern, is very evident, as is the shoulder down. Unfortunately, we haven't really got enough extension to sort of complement those two moves. So during the backswing from P1 to P4, as you can appreciate, we're extending, we're turning, and we're side bending to the left. So as we're going through the swing, we should be doing each one of those incrementally. If we get a little bit out of sequence and one or two of these pieces are done too much too soon, we just start to throw things off a little bit. Now, it's much better than not doing them at all, but it could potentially, or does potentially lead to you being a little bit too erratic. So when we look at you at P3, maybe 2.8, trail legs too straight, trail hips turn behind you too much too soon, heads drop down, not enough extension to complement the turning and the side bending, and we see the lead arm is in a little bit too much, and we'll come to that a little bit later on some of the thoughts and checkpoints that I'd like to give you. As we then go to P4, we continue to work sort of inwards more than upwards. So if you think about the backswing, it's a gradual sort of inwards and upwards move with the hands. The inward is dominating first here, which is why we can see a butt of the club, which is very much behind the trail shoulder. Now, I'm a fan of having the butt of the club maybe 4-5 inches behind the trail shoulder. I certainly don't like it over the top of it for most players, but we do need to move the hands a little bit more in this direction at the top of the backswing without lifting the hands too much or lifting the arms too much, because I really like the pressure that you put on the trail arm against the torso. So we'll come to that a little bit later. When we view it from face on, you can see that sort of downwards early as the knees change flex too quick. Forward with the pelvis as well, so we've got the pelvis a little bit too far forward at P4. So again, you know, that's far better than having the weight back, but it's overdone a little bit. We're looking to have a stable top of the backswing position. So if the weight's 60-40 at setup, it's 60-40 at the top. So a little bit too much straightening of the right leg, a little bit, or too much too soon, a little bit too much emphasis on shoulder down, hands in, and also a little bit too much emphasis on pushing that weight forward. So like I said, it's not that it's got bad things in it, it's just the sequencing of these moves. What you're going to see now in transition is both centres moving forward. So there's not really enough separation between the two centres. Weight moves further forward. Now, for all intents and purposes now, you're going to come in sort of relatively steep and even run the risk of sort of, you know, thinning this ball because you're coming down sort of almost too far in front of it. So what's going to happen now is you're going to see with the yellow arrows, the wrist angles are going to come out a little bit too fast to try and widen the arc, to try and shallow the angle of attack. The problem with that is it's very, very hard to control and regulate, especially when the lie is not sort of ideal when you're out on the golf course. When we look at it from down the line, at P5, as with P3, the lead arm is in slightly too much. You don't quite get P3 on this, but the lead arm is in slightly too much. The shaft is sitting down slightly too flat. And then we start to see the wrist angles come out. Now from here you have an interesting one because you sort of have an artificially low exit. And what I mean by that is, for someone who is so deep at P5, you were very, very low at P9. You'd expect to see the hand path from your P5, you'd expect to see the hands projected out this way and the exit be much higher. So again, that's a sort of artificial exit. You can see there you put the turn of the chest in very late, almost like a little bit of a rescue job. So this is about improving your stability, becoming stable, which is a big part of the system obviously, and improving your sequencing throughout. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to get your down the line footage on against some of the model players, let you have a look at some key alignments that I've just touched on there, and then we're going to do the same with the face on. And when it comes, each one I'm going to give you a little bit of a feel and a little bit of a visual that I'd like you to work on, and then hopefully within the week you can send me that footage across and we can just elaborate a little bit further, add a little bit more detail, and get you working on a slightly different drill. Okay, so here we've got Charlie Wee and yourself down the line. I'm just going to take Charlie back to, I'm going to take him all the way back to P4 a few times, just let you look at everything's incremental. Knees are changing flex throughout the backswing. Hands are working inwards and upwards. Shoulders working down throughout. There's some key alignments here that we talked about, is that the trail leg is straightening throughout the backswing rather than straightening too much too early. See how that, here we're not too bad at P2. We're looking relatively tidy. Knees have changed flex a small amount. Hands are in. Club hasn't rolled behind you. Shoulders working down. Now in Charlie's case, that's going to continue. The right arm's going to start to flex to allow the left arm to keep moving. We get a little bit of upward creeping in there with yourself. This trail leg's going to straighten much quicker. And that's providing the inward component. And as a result, we get everything a little bit too deep. That continues to P4. In Charlie's case, there's a little bit more upward. And the club, or the butt of the club, doesn't get quite as far behind the trail shoulder. So what I want you to feel here is that instead of the lead arm being angled in, let's say 40 degrees, so if you were putting a shaft on the ground looking above, it would look something like this. I want you to feel that your lead arm, this is only a feel, I want you to feel like your lead arm is only angled in about 20 degrees at P3. And if you're filming this in the back garden, we're looking to have the shaft through the base of the bicep. You can see there, Charlie's arm is not angled in 20 degrees, it's angled in about 40 degrees. But the act of doing that is going to calm down the straightening of this leg, which is pulling everything in too much too soon, which results in the top of the backswing position we see. So at P3, you want to feel like your lead arm is angled in 20 degrees. And then at P5, now Charlie's arms drift out slightly, which is fine. The arms at P5 in the model should be about 15 to 20 degrees in. Now, what I'd like you to do is try and get the arms at P5 to match that 20 degree line that we'd put down. So P3, arms in 20, P5, arms in 20. That's a feel. That would have you, when done correctly, the shaft hitting you around about mid bicep, like you see here with Charlie. On the way through, I want you to feel like you keep your arms straight, and I want you to feel like your hands are swinging directly down the range, if you will. Arms straight, point everything down the range at this point. Arms straight, point everything down the range more at that point. See how the hands aren't sort of appearing sort of from behind Charlie's body at this stage, and there hasn't been an excessive turn and extension on the way through. So that's you down the line. I'm just going to flip over now to face on, and then I'll leave it with you to work on and look forward to getting some extra footage. Okay, so from face on, we talked about how we wanted to create a stable upper and stable lower axis. You see the Grant does that beautifully. Pelvis doesn't drift forward too much. Head stays within the ring. Turning, tilting and extending incrementally, keeping everything stable. Now there is a little bit of movement in the head. They're the neck tilts that I'm going to come on to when I give you a thing to work on from face on. In our case, our head moves down and forward slightly, and the pelvis moves forward a little bit too much, a little bit too soon. Sorry, I didn't quite get P4 there. But there's definitely a little bit too much movement down and forward. So we're side bending and turning without extending, and we're not controlling the pelvis correctly because of what we looked at from down the line, the trail leg straightening too much too soon, etc, etc. And you can see already that your arms are looking much flatter than his because of how deep they've gone. They look a little bit shorter when viewed from face on. Grant isn't picking his arms up off his torso, but he's turning everything on a more tilted angle. So everything that he's doing is more tilted towards us rather than being turned behind. So I want you to emphasize or introduce some extension. So I'm just going to get rid of those lines now and put a couple of relatively simple checkpoints on here, and these are your feels. Okay, if there was a cane on the ground between Grant's feet, he would be making his backswing on top of that club or that cane. If we had one between yours, you're making that backswing in front of that cane. So good visual if you put a cane down in the centre of your stance, or put a golf ball in the centre of your stance. It's not for ball position or anything like that, just to give you a feeling of stability during the backswing. The other thing you then notice is his chest is pointing slightly more to the sky than yours, and his ear is pointing slightly more to the ground than yours. And that's a sign that he has extended and come out of his forward bend much more than you have from P1 to P4. So you're emphasizing the extension in the trail leg, which is giving you the rotation. There's not enough extension in the pelvis, chest, and neck. So we need to do that, and we need to introduce it incrementally. So your thoughts from face on, so you've got your thoughts and your alignments from down the line. Your thoughts from face on, stay over the top of the cane during the backswing, point the chest to the sky and the ear to the ground at P4. Now, if you want to see a really good example of this, I did an online lesson very similar to this, particularly from face on, for a guy called Cody Collins. It's on my YouTube channel. If you go look at part 2 of his first lesson, might actually be second lesson anyway, it's a 2-part lesson. Go look at part 2, Cody Collins, and you'll see a perfect demonstration of someone implementing this change and the impact it had on his backswing. His sequencing was slightly different. He moved off the ball rather than out in front of it, but he introduced the same feels of ear to the ground, chest to the sky, and it was quite a remarkable change in his P4. You got any questions, feel free to drop me a line. I look forward to getting the footage for part 2 of this session, and if there's anything else you'd like to know, like I say, do not hesitate. Thank you.